let's get started. We have Kobie Crawford here at the Databricks Mountain View offices. Kobie is a developer relations expert. Welcome, and thanks for joining us.
And
Mark is here too. And
hello, everybody.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself? What brought you to Databricks, and what's on your mind?
Sure. Well, I'm in developer relations at Databricks via the acquisition of Mosaic ML. So I was working with Mosaic ML doing technical marketing type things, connecting with the research community as well as connecting with practitioners to try to help get the word out about Mosaic ML, what we were doing, and get people interested in scalability and the kinds of efficiency things that could be done around how to improve where ML was headed at the time. And since we got acquired, we've been continuing that mission. Still after that, making sure that people can appreciate the idea that they can actually get AI that works specifically for them, works well for them by customizing it for their own data. We see in general that people have, like it's essentially like there's kind of like sort of two kind of narratives that tend to go out there. Like the first one is essentially like that whatever you're going to build, you can get a general purpose model that's exceptional, right? It's like, the top models out there, GPT-4 and now GPT-4o, and things like this are really amazing in terms of what they're able to do in general purpose sense. But what we find in general around how people may ultimately want to see their application development go is that they may want to be able to customize. There are companies that have data that is like intrinsically proprietary. There's also data that's protected by regulatory concerns and things like this, privacy concerns. And in each of these cases, you want to have the ability to keep control of your data. You want to be able to make sure that like what you're doing with your data is something that you have, like full end-to-end control. And so with that in mind, and also what the model should be able to do for you in mind, customizing your own model becomes something we kind of expect. Our thesis is that that's something that companies all should want to do. So that ends up leading us down this path. For what we have is, a platform on which people can do all of the things around their data, around every aspect of what they want to do, including training AI models. And so, like the Mosaic acquisition fits into the Databricks' larger thing to give people the ability to do large language models and other like really high demand LLM capabilities as part of what they put together for their applications.
Very cool. I'm actually not familiar with Mosaic ML. Can you maybe describe like what Mosaic did, and then maybe like at a high level what Databricks does, just for like our listeners who aren't familiar with that?
Sure. So starting with Mosaic ML, the company was started with the idea that, in fact, the co-founder and CEO, Naveen Rao, wanted to call it Mosaic's Law, that we could make model training 4 times more efficient year over year, every year, to make sort of efficiency sort of like the key sort of thing that you pursue. And that way, if we had a platform that was giving us, very efficient model training, as we saw, the models getting larger and larger, and the computational needs getting just, ballooning, that would be like a vitally important thing. So that was the way the model, the business got started, and we worked on delivering efficiency through algorithmic improvements in software, and wanted to show people that there were actually ways to go about that. There was a thing that the chief scientist, one of the other people at the center of this, Jonathan Frankel, talked about, which is like, he said that, the math is not sacred. Like the idea behind how ML works, how you actually build these models, that there are ways to look at what we could do that would actually be algorithmic changes that would still yield models that deliver the performance that you're after. And so that was where things got going. And as we went forward, we ended up training a 7 billion parameter model in BT7B that we released, that and we made it open so people could actually go ahead and leverage it and use it. And the performance that it delivered at the time was a big, boost on what people had with public models at the time at the size that we were delivering them.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the leading open source models at the time.
Yeah.
Since then, we have had Llama and a couple other models, and of course, Databricks' own model.
Yeah. The pace at which people are releasing new models that have done just that much better is dizzying.
It's really wild how many new models are coming out. And I think maybe we kind of touched about it, but Databricks came out with a really cool state-of-the-art model, the DBRX model.
Yeah.
And also, I want to just like thank you for making that open source. So I think like the world needs more open source models, and DBRX that's there. So yeah, thanks for giving that back to the community. So maybe, I don't know, would you be able to kind of talk a little bit about like the DBRX? Like, how does it compare to maybe some like other models? Like, what are maybe some of the use cases you've seen people using it for?
And I'm also curious, I assume it builds on a lot of the work from Mosaic's NPT model, right?
It does in some ways, yes. In fact, one of the things that we have talked about is that our approach to this model was able to get more efficiency, speaking of efficiency again, more efficiency in terms of like how much model improvement we could get per token applied to training. And so that we were able to even do some comparisons that showed that if we had gone back and done some of the techniques that we used for DBRX to train a model that was the same size and same architecture as MPT-7B, that even that model, with our improvements in efficiency that we developed since then, even that model would be better at the same size because of the way we've improved efficiency in terms of how we process and do things. So those efficiency improvements plus a non-trivial architectural shift, which was we moved to mixture of experts. And, for people to like, I'm doing my best to do like a quick 30-second thing on how MOE works, mixture of experts works. Within the context of the model, like at a high level, let's take one step and say like the thing still is one input, one output, right? Like output tokens are still being generated, standard autoregressive behavior of a language model. So that hasn't changed. None of that has changed. But within the model itself, what you do is you make it so that for any given token production step, in terms of one prediction being done, you don't actually invoke all of the neurons. You invoke some subset of them. And this is where like this notion of experts comes into play, where there's an initial routing step that happens that actually makes a choice of a particular subset of the rest of the neurons of the model that are going to be fired. And then those additional ones are fired at that level. So in our model, there were 16 experts, and for each model, 4 of them would be invoked. So the model total size, 132 billion parameters. But for any one token being processed, only 36 billion parameters were invoked at that time. It doesn't come out to exactly like 1 over like 4 or 16, doesn't come out to exactly 25%. We could go into details about the architecture and sort of fill those blanks. But at a high level, you're getting a model that can deliver performance closer to that 132 billion parameter size while only using 36 billion parameters worth of computation per token generation. So it becomes much more efficient. Again, fewer computations per token generation, while at the same time still being able to deliver higher performance, compare comparable to larger models. So that's really probably the most important thing, that we've actually made a path through which people can have a similar MOE development training experience, where you can actually get MOE and train it on our platform. And we've shown with DBRX that this can be done. It can be done to deliver a very high quality model.
Yeah, it's very exciting that you were able to make such big performance gains. And honestly, I think that the DBRX model kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think that Databricks, in terms of like ML and AI, it wasn't really on my radar. Like everybody knows like OpenAI and like how Microsoft and Facebook and everybody's like doing stuff. And then it was like, you look at the benchmarks, like, wow, like what is this DBRX model? It's like, it just came out of like completely left field. So it was really like incredibly exciting. Have you noticed any kind of particular use cases that people were able to use maybe with like the DBRX model, or just like with like some Databricks' platforms in general?
The use cases are kind of still like there's growth in a lot of areas, of course, but like a lot of the things that people kind of typically expect, making chatbots and things like that, are still by far the most popular thing that people are doing with them. I don't have like a set of things that I know I can talk about in terms of like what our customers are doing that I know are like released to fair game to be discussed. So I'm not in the great position to do that. We do have a number of customer stories that are published on our blog, and I would end up going to refer back to those to sort of make sure to just to safely talk about the right use cases. But it is actually really nice to see how the use cases are starting to diversify. You know, the chatbot is still popular, but it's like there are more things that people are coming out with. And as we start to see other things, and I'm going to segue right into talking about compound AI systems here when I do, as we start to talk about like what else people want to see generative AI contribute to, a lot of the use cases are now talking about like, what do we want to have happen as a result of having an LLM involved? We take natural language, we have it come in, we turn that into SQL and now query databases. And so like, that's an example of, you know, something where you're going to do a standard SQL query on the result of this, that the LLM has been able to take a person's spoken input and then generate that call and then go get the data that way. And there's a thing that's getting more common is for people to do that kind of work. Similarly, from there, you can imagine sort of more generic function calling, not just using SQL language, but other things where people want to take in some inputs and then pass in a call to another thing that might be, you know, a JSON blob that gets generated by the LLM, and then make that call to another API that's got to generate a, you know, just based standard REST API, generate some response.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that type of workflow, you could really imagine some really powerful things being built. Because if you can have like an LLM which can call an API, and then that API can return a response, and then the LLM can go do something based off that response. I mean,
yes,
it's like, I mean, the skies are the limit, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's like a very exciting times we live in, and I don't think that like I think that like the models like just recently have become good enough to like actually make that type of workflow possible. So I feel like I'm really excited for like the next 6 months while we start to see people actually like leveraging these models to make like agentic workflows. And also like, I think because the models are getting smaller and also good, like you're going to be able to do that like much more cheaply than having to, you know, pay for like an API call every time.
Yeah.
So really exciting stuff. Yeah. So I think that like I want to be respectful of time because we are hosting an event this year at Databricks' office in Mountain View. So that's coming up soon. So I want to like, you know, wrap this up relatively soon, but is there any like kind of events or things that you want to plug that maybe we didn't talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got Data and AI Summit coming up June 10th to the 13th. That's going to be hosted at Moscone Center in San Francisco. We're really excited about that. It's a big thing. We're expecting, I think it's something like 14,000 people. And the selling is already like most of the way there. Like, so for people who are interested and want to come out, we should really go ahead and jump on it and get on board. So we're really fired up about that event. You know, people are going to be there to talk about like all things Databricks across the full spectrum of what Databricks offers, not just the LLM space, but everything else that goes into what the company does, which involves, you know, sort of like a unified governance platform for everybody's data, you know, so that, as you know, you talk about, you know, any given organization has, you know, a variety of sources of data, whether it's, if it's you're in the manufacturing space, you know, you've got all of your inputs that are going into how your product is being built and whatnot. And that may be, you know, Internet of Things data as well as a bunch of other things. You could have just standard financial data things. So companies aggregate so much when they're doing all the business processes. And the idea behind Databricks as a company is that, you know, once you have all of those data managed in a single place, in the lakehouse, or, you know, we're talking about this data intelligent platform as the way we talk about it now, you have the opportunity with that to be able to get insights that cut across departments, that cut across the different functional areas that you work in, and be able to yield the kind of insights that are going to help companies, you know, really succeed. And, you know, the way the CEO Ali Ghodsi talks about it, he's like, you know, the best company in every sector in the industry is going to be an AI company. They're going to be using AI as how they get ahead in the world. So that's what we put on display for people at Data and AI Summit, you know, the full spectrum of things, including the parts that get done with LLMs. So like they all get put together into a large package and it works pretty well. So that's the goal.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll try to put the link to that maybe in the show notes. So for the listeners that are interested, they can, you know, come and just click on that. So anyways, yeah, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Mark and Shashank, it's been great meeting you. Thank you for making the time this happen.
Of course, this was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Mark.
Yeah.
Let's get started.
So we're back. So we just interviewed Kobie, but now we have a new person from Databricks, which is Nishant. Maybe would you be able to introduce yourself and maybe talk about what you do at Databricks?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Nishant Deshpande. I'm a specialist solution architect, or SSA internally. And what that basically means is I help our customers use Databricks, solve problems when they come up with problems, or and I particularly work on. So I've been in Databricks 2 years. I mostly have been working on optimization problems, Spark, architecture problems. But then lately, since we've had a lot of people trying to use Databricks for Gen AI stuff, I've also been helping people with Gen AI. And so I have some background in machine learning. I've gone between data stuff and machine learning stuff throughout my career. So yeah, I'm sort of getting back into the Gen AI phase of machine learning, I guess.
So unlike Kobie, you didn't come from the Mosaic acquisition. You were at Databricks for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm curious about how that acquisition and merging of two separate companies is panning out, because I've worked at Google for a while and I've been through, merging with Nest at Fitbit and the hardware team. And I think like acquisitions and merging cultures, engineering backgrounds and priorities and stuff is a little challenging. And as far as I know, I don't think Databricks had much of a focus on building ML models, as far as I understand. And it seems like a relatively new thing, especially with the new DBRX model, where you guys are building models yourself and releasing them, open source, or having bigger models which are closed source. So how is that focus changing after that acquisition?
I don't know if I'm going to be able to enlighten you that much, to be honest, because, I haven't been interacting a huge amount with the Mosaic team, etc. So, the simple answer is I couldn't give you much insight. But
you mentioned that even your focus has shifted from like working on like Spark and stuff like that to Gen AI work. So
I don't know. It shifted more. Like obviously a year ago, I guess a year a bit ago, we didn't have everyone trying to use Gen AI in some capacity, right? Like I think 3.0 was out, November?
Something like that.
Something, right?
Yeah.
Like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's only in the last year that, I think everyone has used GPT or whatever personally, and everyone's like, we need to use this for X, Y, Z at, for our professional work, right? So everyone's trying to do that. But yeah, so anyway, point being that, I still do a lot of sort of performance engineering and optimization, stuff like that. But yes, some more focus, I would say, on people coming with Gen AI and trying to work out how to use Databricks, especially people that already do a lot of their data processing in Databricks. So it's the place where they're already, doing a lot of data stuff, and then it's a natural sort of extension to say, okay, how do we take that and use it for Gen AI? So that's how those customers that I worked with before to do data pipelines and BI and how to use Spark well for all of that is now those things extend into, okay, we have all this data. How do we fine tune a model? Or how do you use RAG with all that data? So that's, I don't know that answers your question, but.
Yeah, I guess, can you take us through an example of like a customer archetype that has data in Databricks and that's doing one of the things that you mentioned, either fine-tuning or building a RAG on top of it, and how the Databricks suite of tools helps with that?
Or just like anything that people have been able to take advantage, or like maybe not something that people have done, but like something based off of like everything that new has been built, like any kind of like future use cases that you think you would like to see built.
I think the fun thing is almost being like where you see people were doing. So they had, let's say, I won't give out names of companies because I don't know which companies are confidential and so on and so forth. So I'll just avoid doing that. But so I worked on something where there's a company that is ingesting PDFs, right? And they were doing that with more traditional. They had tools that were scanning, OCR type tools, scanning PDFs, getting those texts. But then the images would cause problems when the documents had different formatting. It would cause problems and so on. And now with Gen AI, they just switch and they're like, we're going to use these multimodal models. We're not going to use the whole thing anymore at all. Or like just entity extraction, right? This was something that we had NLP models to do. And there are lots of them out there, right? And now people are just like, I'm going to use some LLM and I'm going to just prompt it to say, extract entities from this, and does it. So all of this NLP stuff that we used before to do like entity extraction was a very common use case, right? Is now shifted, or I shouldn't say shifted, I don't know if it's also shifted, but a lot of it just shifted to, let's just use an LLM. Or like classification, right? There's lots of classification models out there, machine learning models that people have developed over time and so on. And now you see people literally just calling an LLM saying, here are 3 examples of classifying. Now classify this.
So you're saying, I guess like a few shot example with an LLM is better than traditional NLP classifiers or entity extractors.
I mean, I couldn't say it better in the sense that I have data to say it's better, but I'm saying that I have seen people switch to using LLMs for that type of task, like before they were using more traditional models. Yeah. So it probably, or it's simpler. And
that's what I was going to say. I wonder if it's just a lot easier to use an LLM as like, a shotgun approach to just cover every single NLP use case, as opposed to figuring out this specific NLP tool to extract entities and so on.
I think so.
Even though the NLP approach might be a lot more cost effective and more targeted, because with these LLMs, I think you have to format the output a little bit to parse specific data points that you're trying to extract, because there's a lot of variation in the output. So despite NLP approaches being a lot more robust, I think LLMs are a lot simpler to use.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like terms being flown around here. We've got, just for those listening, we talked about entity extraction, classification, and also NLP. Maybe can we try to define some of these terms so everybody's able to catch up to the conversation? So maybe let's start with just like, what is NLP?
Yeah, I could try to take a stab at it.
Okay.
NLP was like a traditional natural language processing where you try to understand what someone is saying. This can be, Google trying to understand what is the user's query and when they're typing something in the search engine, or, someone's searching for something in Facebook, eBay, whatever. You're typing a phrase and you want to extract the intent behind that. You want to extract some meaning out of it. And within NLP, there's a lot of different tasks or focus areas. So one of those is entity extraction. So, for example, on Twitter, someone posts something. You kind of want to look at a bunch of tweets and find out, okay, how many people are talking about Elon Musk, for example, or how many people are talking about Trump and whoever else that you're interested in. And moving on to some of the other focus areas within NLP, there's classification. So I guess maybe if you're a marketing agency or a marketing, maybe like an advertising platform, you want to classify content in different areas. So that way, if you want to show ads within your platform, you want to show ads that are within a specific category next to that specific type of content. So you would maybe want to classify tweets as related to fashion or finance or health. That way, if you have advertisers, you can show those ads next to those tweets. And there's a bunch of other NLP workloads that have been used. And this uses parts of speech to break down a sentence into its semantic structure with like subject, object, verb, articles, nouns, pronouns. And there's a lot of traditional ML that is focused specifically for this type of task. And then you break that down into like a bag of words, and you use those bags of words to kind of see which words occur most frequently with this category. For example, shopping. That way you can like classify, okay, since there are a lot of words related to shopping, maybe classify as shopping. But now with LLMs, I think there's a lot of magic happening with these transformers, and it does a much better job at understanding the meaning of a phrase, a sentence, a paragraph, much better than any of these manually constructed rules that have been used in NLP. I don't know if that makes sense, or if you have a better way.
No, I think that makes sense. Like I said, I don't know if they do it a huge amount better. I honestly don't know that, but it is so accessible to anyone that, like we're talking in English, not in programming language. Yeah. And so people clearly prefer to just tell a prompt, extract me any names you see in this text, than working out, I need to download this spacey thing or this NLP toolkit, and then I need to code it, and then how do I now call it? All that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. To me, it's just like thinking about, you mentioned entity extraction when you said just like names in the text, right? Like, I mean, you could go and, you could like read a PDF and then pull out the interesting parts of the PDF. And then I would imagine, I'm actually curious, are you able to do entity extraction amongst like data that you would store within Databricks as well? So like if I have like a bunch of data stored in any one of your like types of data stores, would I be able to like, maybe run some like queries and do some LLM workflows on top of that?
Yeah. So people, we've had workloads that would go over data in a data lake and in tables or whatever, and call out to APIs, which formerly or create UDFs, which formerly would import some LLM library, not LLM, I'm sorry, it's like NLP library, do some bunch of work and spit out whatever it was going. Like PII is another good use case, right? There were all these toolkits that were trying to identify PII. And now people just call an LLM and say, from all this text, tell me if it has PII or extract it. But point being, so we use Spark for many of our things, and that runs over lots of data. It can take pieces of data and make function calls, make API calls. So now before those API calls were to some NLP library. Now those API calls are to some LLM endpoint. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is like a really exciting use case. You mentioned to identify PII. So for those that don't know, PII is like personally identifiable information. So that'll be things like, names, emails, addresses, credit card numbers, bank account details, whatever. All the stuff that like you may want like censored. So I think that's like a really interesting use case to say like, hey, like find me this and then take it out of the response. So then you don't accidentally inadvertently start saving information that you don't want, because oftentimes like PII data could be like really unstructured data, maybe hard to know exactly where it is. I think that's like a really interesting use case for LLMs, that like maybe there's like tools out there that potentially do it better, but those may be more expensive, and LLMs might be just like really easy. Like, hey, like find the PII, take it out.
Yeah. And again, maybe I don't even know if it necessarily is better, honestly. Maybe LLMs do it better. But like if you think about, we've all heard about people, there's actually regulations in many industries that you have to, you can't keep PII for X time, or you have to remove it if people ask for it and so on. So that's number one. But then think about like, if you're fine tuning or in some way training an LLM, right? You're feeding it information. And imagine if like your address and social security number and stuff is in that information. And then someone asks a question and out comes like your address and social security number as an answer to all kinds of stuff, right? So yeah, I think it's becoming as people are working out, more and more people are training or fine-tuning on, like maybe 6 months ago, right? There were like, I don't know, in the US, maybe 20 companies that were fine-tuning an LLM, right? And now there are hundreds, maybe thousands. Like you've seen lots of use cases at Databricks. So I'm imagining there is, I don't know, 100x that out there, right? They're training or at least fine-tuning LLMs with data that they have. And a lot of it's for internal use and so on. So yeah, I mean, that's, it is a systems problem. And we're going to, I think, go over that, which is how do you make sure that you train with the right data and don't inadvertently introduce things that you don't want to, basically. So yeah, so I think we get a lot of people asking, how do we do that? Like, how do we make sure that that happens? And so that's not unlike other systems problems, right? Slightly different, but like, you know, where there is data, lots of data, and we need to make sure that it's used properly and goes through different checks and filters and whatnot, and you can see what data was used and all this type of stuff. So a lot of the problems are similar, but they're now being applied to feeding an LLM in some way. So
yeah, I know we're running low on time. We have an event at 6:00, and it is now 5:53. So Nishant, appreciate us just like pulling you into the conference room and for us to ask you a few questions about Databricks. But before we kind of wrap up, is there anything that like you want to bring up that maybe we didn't ask you about, maybe that you think that we should know, or maybe the audience might be interested in?
Not. I mean, I'm yeah, just looking forward to the event, and yeah, I mean, I think it's like I've been doing this stuff since for 20 plus years, and I definitely think this is one of the bigger waves, and that includes literally like mobile and almost internet and so on. So it's yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty crazy what we're going to see, I think, in the next 3-4 years. So it's going to be fun.
It's exciting.
That's awesome. I think that's a sentiment I've heard unanimously from everyone that we've spoken to.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think it's a bubble? Do you think it'll keep going?
No, I mean, look, we just had a crypto bubble, right? Like three years ago, maybe, or I don't know, whatever it was. But if you went and asked people, well, not even random people. I mean, you don't meet random people in the Bay Area, right? But if you're gonna like, hey, have you used crypto? Like, mostly it was like, no, right? And right now, if you ask a 14-year-old, have you used chat? They're like, yeah, I do my homework with it. All the way from, if you ask you ask anyone, and they're like, yeah, of course I used it. So at least around here, right? So I think it's a very different quality to other hype that we've seen. So there's hype, but I think like I don't think there's any doubt that there will be millions of LLMs deployed, and people and things will be using them. Like that seems like databases. Like if I say databases, you're like, well, yeah, of course every company uses databases. And I think like in X years, when you have companies that will say we don't use an LLM, I really doubt it. So
yeah, that's true. It does feel kind of like a fundamental technology that maybe everybody's going to adopt, right? Like where crypto, you mentioned, I think that has its place, but it does seem like everybody's using the LLMs, kind of like everybody's using the cell phone, the internet. So I don't know. Maybe it's appropriately hyped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Okay. Perfect. Well, yeah. Thanks again for your time.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks.